I hadn't planned on staying long that afternoon. My best friend had invited me over, saying we'd hang out, maybe grab food later. When I showed up, though, he was already halfway out the door, running an errand he'd forgotten about, promising he'd be back soon. So there I was, standing in the quiet entryway of his house, shoes still on, a little awkward, when his mom appeared. She smiled politely at first, the kind of warm smile that never feels forced. She was in her early 40s, I guessed, but there was something timeless about the way she carried herself. Her hair was pinned loosely back, a few strands falling to frame her face. Even in the soft light of the living room, she seemed graceful, like she belonged perfectly in her own space. "Looks like he ditched you," she said, her tone light, teasing. "You can wait here. I'll make some tea." I followed her into the kitchen, still unsure if I should stay. But there was a calmness in the way she moved, in the way her hands knew exactly where everything was, the clink of cups, the steam rising as she poured water. The air smelled faintly of jasmine and something sweet, maybe vanilla. When she set the cup in front of me, she sat across the table instead of rushing off to her own business. Her eyes settled on me, not in a judgmental way, not like I was just her son's friend, but like she was curious. We made small talk at first. She asked about school, about work. Her voice was warm, steady, the kind that drew you in without you realizing. I found myself answering more honestly than I expected, noticing details I wouldn't usually care about. The way her bracelets clicked softly when she lifted her cup, the way she tucked her hair behind her ear when she listened. Then, out of nowhere, she tilted her head slightly, as if deciding something. "Can I tell you a secret?" she asked, her lips curving into a half-smile. I laughed nervously. Sure." She leaned in just enough that I felt the space between us shrink, her voice dropping low, like she was letting me in on something private. "Do you know what women really want? Most men your age don't." Her words hung in the air, heavier than they should have been. I froze, trying to play it cool, but inside my chest something tightened. There was no teasing lilt in her voice, no sarcasm, just curiosity, like she was testing me, waiting for a real answer. But I didn't have one. So I just sat there, my throat dry, my eyes caught on hers, wondering what exactly she meant, and why it suddenly mattered so much to me. The silence stretched, not uncomfortable, but charged, like the room itself was holding its breath. And in that moment, I realized this wasn't going to be just another casual afternoon. The tea between us had grown lukewarm, but neither of us seemed in a rush to move. The kitchen felt cocooned in late afternoon light, golden streaks slipping through the curtains and painting the wooden table in warm tones. She leaned back slightly, her fingers resting around her cup, eyes never straying far from mine. There was something about the way she looked at me, not intense, not overwhelming, but as though she saw more than what I said out loud. "You know," she began softly, tilting her head. "Most men spend their whole lives trying to impress women with big gestures. Flowers, expensive dinners, over-the-top words." She paused, her lips curving into a thoughtful smile. "But what women really want is much simpler." I tried to steady my expression, but inside, curiosity tightened like a knot in my chest. I wanted to ask, but I was almost afraid of how seriously I wanted to know. "It's about being present," she continued, her tone calm, almost like she was explaining something to a younger version of herself. "It's about noticing when she's tired, listening when she doesn't even say much. It's choosing to be aware instead of distracted." I nodded slowly, not just to show I understood, but because the weight of her words sank in deeper than I expected. She leaned forward then, elbows resting lightly on the table. The distance between us shrank just enough that I caught the faint scent of her perfume, something floral, familiar, but softer now, like it belonged to her, and only her. Her hand moved toward the sugar bowl, sliding it casually across the table. But in that small motion, her fingers brushed mine. Just for a second. It wasn't deliberate, or maybe it was, but the effect was immediate. The contact was feather-light, yet it sent a pulse through me, like the air had changed temperature. My chest tightened, and I swallowed quickly, afraid the sound would give me away. She noticed. I knew she did. A tiny flicker passed through her eyes, but she didn't pull back too fast or make it awkward. She just let the moment settle, unspoken, then continued talking as if nothing had shifted. "You'd be surprised," she said, her voice lower now, steadier. How rare it is for a man to really listen, to look past what a woman says and notice what she feels. Her words struck something deep inside me, maybe because I realized how often I'd done the opposite, how often I'd been more focused on what to say next than on really listening. I wanted to ask her more, to lean into this unexpected lesson, but a part of me was frozen. Not from fear exactly, but from the intensity of how close we suddenly felt, sitting there in her kitchen with the world so quiet around us. I glanced down at my hand, still tingling where hers had grazed it, and for the first time I wondered if she wasn't just teaching me, but testing me. The room had grown quieter, as if the walls themselves leaned into here. The golden light of afternoon was beginning to fade, softening into the first shadows of evening. I shifted slightly in my chair, realizing how long we'd been sitting there, though it hadn't felt long at all. She rested her chin lightly against her hand, studying me in that calm, unhurried way of hers. "Can I tell you something?" she asked. Her tone was softer than before, less like she was teaching and more like she was simply letting me in. "Of course," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. She drew in a slow breath, her eyes briefly flicking toward the window before returning to mine. "People look at me and assume I've got everything figured out. Strong, independent, confident. But," she let out a quiet laugh that didn't sound entirely amused, "sometimes I feel invisible. Like I've been playing a role for so long that no one bothers to ask what's underneath." Her words hung there, fragile, honest. It startled me a little to hear her peel back the mask like that. She wasn't my friend's mom in that moment. She wasn't the woman who kept the house warm and the conversations polite. She was human, vulnerable, and she had chosen to show that to me. I cleared my throat, unsure how much of myself to give back. But the silence urged me forward, and before I could second-guess it, I admitted, "I get that. In my own way. Around women my age, I feel forgettable, I guess. Like I'm just background noise they tune out. I never really know what they want, or if they even notice me at all." Her expression shifted instantly, gentle, empathetic, almost protective. She reached across the table, her hand brushing mine again, but this time she didn't pull back. She let her palm rest over my knuckles, her thumb grazing once, just lightly. The warmth of her touch sank into me, grounding yet electric. My chest tightened, not from nerves alone, but from the realization that she was listening, truly listening, in a way I hadn't experienced before. "You're not invisible," she said quietly. Her eyes held mine, steady, unwavering. "Not to me." The words slipped straight past my defenses. I swallowed, my throat suddenly dry, but I couldn't look away. There was no teasing in her tone, no game. Just truth, simple and heavy. For a long moment, neither of us moved. The ticking of the clock in the hallway filled the silence, marking each second that felt stretched and charged. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding, and when I finally spoke, it was barely more than a whisper. "I don't know why, but it feels different talking to you." Her hand gave the slightest squeeze, almost imperceptible, but enough to steady me. "Maybe," she said, her lips curving into the faintest smile, "that's because you're finally being seen." And in that quiet, I realized something had shifted between us, something fragile, unspoken, and undeniable. By the time evening settled in, the house felt different, quieter, softer, almost like the world outside had slipped away. The lamps in the living room glowed with a warm amber light, casting gentle shadows along the walls. The faint hum of the refrigerator and the occasional creak of the house were the only reminders we weren't suspended in some kind of private bubble. She had suggested we move to the living room, and I followed, carrying my cup. Somehow, though, I ended up sitting beside her on the couch instead of across from her. It wasn't planned, it just felt natural. The cushions dipped slightly under her weight, her shoulder brushing mine with the barest contact. Even that smallest touch made me overly aware of myself, of the space I occupied, of the steady thud of my heartbeat. We shared a glass of wine she had opened, sipping slowly, letting the conversation drift between light topics and quiet pauses. I found myself laughing at her stories, surprised at how easy it felt to lose myself in her voice. And yet, beneath the laughter, there was something else. Every time her eyes lingered on me just a fraction longer than necessary, every time her lips curved into that half-smile, as though she knew exactly what I was thinking, I felt it. A current, pulling me closer. The pauses between our words grew heavier, as though the air itself had thickened. At one point, I glanced over and found her already looking at me. She didn't look away. Her gaze was steady, calm, but layered with something I couldn't quite name. My chest tightened, my throat dry. She leaned in just slightly, close enough that I felt the warmth of her presence. Close enough that the faint sweetness of her perfume brushed against me again. "You're a good listener," she whispered, her voice softer than before, almost like a secret meant only for me. The way she said it wasn't casual, it was deliberate, heavy with meaning. I blinked, searching for a response, but the words tangled inside me. Her breath grazed my ear, warm and delicate, and for a second I forgot how to breathe. "You know how rare that is," she continued, her voice carrying a quiet vulnerability now. "To feel like someone is really hearing you?" The truth of it sank deep. My chest felt both light and heavy, my pulse racing, but my body rooted to the spot. I wanted to answer, to tell her she wasn't just heard. She was felt. But the moment was too fragile, too electric, and I didn't trust myself to speak without shattering it. So instead, I just looked at her, letting my silence say everything I couldn't put into words. Her lips curved into the faintest smile, as though she understood perfectly. And in that moment, the air between us wasn't just charged, it was alive. I needed air. The weight of that moment, her voice brushing my ear, the way her eyes lingered on mine, had left me restless, almost dizzy. I excused myself, murmuring something about needing more water, and slipped into the kitchen. The shift in space was immediate. The living room, with its golden glow and her nearness, felt like a dream. The kitchen, dim and cool under a single overhead light, felt harsher, realer. My reflection stared back at me from the window over the sink, and I gripped the counter just to steady myself. "She's your friend's mom. She's older, experienced, someone you're supposed to admire respectfully from a distance." The thoughts came sharp, insistent, cutting through the haze. And yet, beneath them, I could still feel the warmth of her hand from earlier, the closeness of her shoulder against mine, the sound of her whisper replaying in my head like a secret I wasn't supposed to hold. My chest was tight with conflict. One part of me wanted to step back, create distance, pretend the evening had been nothing more than tea and polite conversation. The other part, the louder, truer part, wanted to go back into that living room and not let the moment slip away. Footsteps broke my spiral. Soft, measured. When I turned, she was standing in the doorway, leaning casually against the frame. Her arms were folded, but her posture wasn't guarded. It was almost tentative. The faintest smile curved her lips, but it wasn't playful this time. It was something gentler, edged with vulnerability. "You ran off pretty quick," she said quietly. I swallowed, my voice rougher than I intended. "I just needed a second." Her eyes searched mine, calm but steady, as though she could read the thoughts I was wrestling with. For a moment, she didn't move. Then she asked, simply, "Does it scare you? The way this feels?" The question landed heavier than any touch. My pulse thudded in my ears. Scare me? Yes. Terrify me, even. Because whatever this was, it wasn't casual. It wasn't harmless. It was real, and that made it dangerous. But what scared me even more was the thought of losing it. I let out a shaky breath, unable to meet her eyes for a second. "Yeah," I admitted, my voice low. "It does." Silence stretched between us, thick with meaning. She could have laughed, teased me, turned it into something lighter. But she didn't. She stayed there, watching me with a softness that made it impossible to hide. I forced myself to lift my gaze back to hers. My chest tightened, but the truth came out anyway. But I don't want it to stop. Her expression softened further, the faint smile reaching her eyes this time. She unfolded her arms slowly, like she was letting go of something she'd been holding onto for too long. And in that dimly lit kitchen, with the distance of just a few steps between us, I realized the hesitation wasn't only mine. She felt it too. For a moment, neither of us moved. The space between us felt impossibly heavy, like it carried the weight of everything we hadn't said. Then she stepped forward, slowly, deliberately, not rushing, not forcing, but closing the gap in a way that felt inevitable. The light from the kitchen lamp caught in her hair, softening her features, and for the first time all evening, I noticed a faint nervousness in her eyes. Her hand lifted, hovering for a second as though she was giving me a chance to pull back. When I didn't, Her fingertips brushed lightly against my arm. The touch was feather-soft, barely there, but it sent a warmth through me that was stronger than anything I'd felt all night. Her voice was quiet when she spoke, almost a whisper. "Then don't." I froze, not out of fear, but because of the way those two words seemed to carry everything. Permission, vulnerability, a choice. She stepped closer, her presence warm and grounding, and rested her head gently against my shoulder. The weight of it was delicate, careful, as though she wasn't sure how much of herself she was allowed to give. The moment slowed. I could feel the softness of her hair brushing against my jaw, the faint scent of her perfume wrapping around me. Most of all, I felt the quiet steadiness of her breathing against my chest, a rhythm that calmed the storm in my head. My hand moved almost on its own, hesitant at first, then settling against the small of her back. The fabric of her blouse was smooth under my palm, the curve of her spine warm beneath it. I didn't hold her tightly, just enough to let her know I was there, that I wasn't going anywhere. She exhaled softly, almost like a sigh, and the sound carried more meaning than words ever could. It wasn't relief, exactly. It was something gentler. Trust. I tilted my head slightly, catching the faintest glimpse of her profile. Her eyes were closed, her lips parted just enough to show she was fully present in this fragile closeness. Every nerve in my body screamed to do more, say something, move closer, break the unbearable sweetness of the tension. But I didn't. I stayed still, letting the quiet be enough, letting her lean on me without expecting anything in return. Because the truth was, this wasn't about desire alone. It was about being chosen, being allowed into a space she didn't show anyone else. And in that moment, the tenderness mattered more than anything else could. Her fingers curled lightly into the sleeve of my shirt, grounding herself in me. When she finally spoke, her words were barely audible. I don't even remember the last time I felt this safe. I closed my eyes, letting her words sink in, and whispered back, "Me neither." The world outside might have kept moving, but inside that dimly lit kitchen, time had finally slowed enough for both of us to breathe. Eventually, she pulled back, just slightly, enough to look at me. Her eyes lingered on mine, steady yet softened, as if she were measuring the weight of what had just happened. I didn't move, afraid that even the smallest shift might scatter the fragile calm that had settled between us. "Come on," she said quietly, her voice carrying that same warm steadiness. "Let's sit somewhere more comfortable." We drifted back into the living room, the glow of the lamps spilling across the couch where we had been before. This time, though, there was no pretense of space between us. She settled close, her body angled toward mine, her shoulder pressing lightly against me. It wasn't forced, it was as natural as breathing. Her hand found mine almost unconsciously, our fingers brushing before weaving together. The interlacing was simple, unremarkable to anyone else, but to me it felt like a vow. Her skin was warm, her grip neither tight nor tentative, just sure. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was full, thick with everything we didn't need to explain. Her head tilted toward me until it rested gently against my arm, and the steady weight of it sent a quiet peace through me. For the first time all evening, I wasn't caught in a storm of hesitation or racing thoughts. I was just there, with her, present. She broke the silence eventually, her voice low and almost playful, though tinged with something more serious. "Now you know," she whispered. I turned slightly, glancing down at her. "Know what?" Her lips curved into the faintest smile, the kind of smile that felt like it carried years of experience and unspoken stories. What women really want. The words weren't teasing anymore. They were a conclusion, an answer wrapped in something far more tender than advice. I didn't argue, didn't ask for more explanation. I didn't need to, because I understood now, it wasn't about mystery or guessing games. It was about presence, about choosing to see and be seen, about listening, not just with ears, but with the kind of attention that makes someone feel less alone in the world. I gave her hand a gentle squeeze, my thumb brushing along the curve of her knuckles. No words left my lips, but she must have felt my answer in that small, deliberate touch. She exhaled softly, a sound that was equal parts relief and contentment, and leaned into me more fully. Her warmth pressed against my side, her trust settling like a quiet weight on my chest. The night carried on around us, The faint ticking of the clock, the hush of the house, the world moving beyond the walls, but none of it mattered. All that mattered was the stillness we had found together. I didn't know what tomorrow would bring, or how things might change once my friend walked back through that door. But for that moment, there was no fear, no hesitation, just closeness, just quiet belonging. And for both of us, that was enough.